Welcome to Women Talkin Bout AI. In this episode, Jessica and I discuss our latest tech project, Moxie 2.0. We share insights from recent academic conferences and explore how AI is impacting academic writing and research. Join us for a conversation about technology, education, and ethical AI implementation. Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show today. Jessica and I are chatting excited about our new tech. Jessica, do you want to get us started just describing Moxie 2.0?
Yeah. So Moxie 2.0 is something that's been in the works for quite a while. We paused the development of it because of how rapidly the tech was evolving. We just felt like we needed time for things to stabilize a bit, to really understand the features our users needed. So we did a lot of customer feedback, interviews, and surveys over the summer. We finally felt like we got to a point where we were ready to invest in the development of the new platform, which we did our first beta testing session last night with one of our users. And the new platform it's a totally new user interface. So right now, when you use Moxie, there's a lot of clicking. You have to click on different tools, a different page will load. The new interface is just a single interface. So there's no new pages that will load. So it's a lot more seamless. There isn't that latency that happens when you have to load a new page. Hopefully less friction in that sense, that you're not clicking around and waiting for the page to load. We got some inspiration from some of the frontier models in terms of how to design it. What was, I think, the most interesting to me that I've learned about myself through this experience is how much I enjoy design. I designed the new interface in Canva, which I loved doing. And then seeing that come to life, weirdly, has been really fun. To see something I build in Canva and then suddenly it's a technical platform that I can interact with was a part of this journey that I wasn't expecting to enjoy so much, but I do. That's been interesting. But outside of just being a fan of my own design skills, I really like what our technical team has been able to do in terms of bringing our ideas to life. In terms of some of the new features, just outside of a better user interface, is we are going to release like a library and projects section of the platform that will be not in the immediate release, but in a few weeks. That will allow users to store texts that they're frequently uploading in the platform, such as PDFs or maybe drafts of documents. Also creating projects by grouping those documents and or their chats together in a single project. So thinking about organization. We're also really building out our tutorial sections. There's going to be a Learn Moxie portion of the platform where we're going to build in tutorials and workflows to really help our users understand not just how to leverage Moxie, but how to leverage other AI tools that you might need to use throughout the research process. That's also coming soon. We're waiting for the platform to be developed before we could film those tutorials, but we're excited to get working on those. And then, of course, we have other things in our roadmap that we're building out, but this new Moxie 2.0, I think we'll be able to probably release it in the next week or two. And it just feels like there's been a lot of buildup, and I'm excited.
Yeah, because we started it back, February? I think.
February or March.
February or March. Yeah, we started it and then halted it, but used all the things that we learned during that phase and then took extra steps even to do a lot of user testing over the summer. I got quite a lot of user feedback.
Yeah. A lot.
So thank you to anybody who sat with me on a Zoom call and answered all my exhausting questions. But we listened and we implemented many of those features into the work. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's been interesting. I've been saying lately to you and others, like how much appreciation I have now for any technical app, any technology that I am interacting with on a daily basis that's really intuitive. Like I now understand, as do you, how much work it takes to create a technical product that a user intuitively knows how to engage with. That has been a learning curve for us. What we think is obvious and intuitive is not necessarily what a user thinks. And what one user thinks is obvious is not necessarily what another user thinks is obvious. So it's like, how do you make that decision about where that button goes if you're getting split feedback? And it's just been fascinating, like being on in this industry, which is so different from what we're used to in academia and consulting. So it's been really fascinating to be part of the process of building a technical product. And now anytime I interact with any platform or app, I'm constantly paying attention to those things. Like, oh, that was an interesting decision. Should we make that decision? Should we move that button there or do something in that way? Yeah, I don't know. It's just been fascinating. But I have so much respect for companies and product managers that are able to release products that are useful and intuitive, because it is not easy.
And I think that one of the biggest questions that we ask ourselves is like, what's good friction and what's not so good friction? Because we want to always be on the side ethical applications and maximizing, optimizing the learning opportunities. And that often means a step in the technology that a user would have to go through that it slows them down. For example, almost everything in Moxie, you have to come to the table with something. You come to the table with at the least a topic, a research topic, or research questions, or a problem statement or a purpose statement. If you don't have those things, it will coach you through the process of writing there. But in order to get there, the tool has to ask you questions, or you have to know how to prompt it. What we've learned is that people often don't know how to prompt it. They know how to get text, know how to get something generated. They don't know how to prompt the tool necessarily because they don't know what they need. And especially if they're graduate students, of course they don't know what they need. How would they know? I didn't know.
So I think of two major problems that we've had. One is, let's talk about the friction piece. I had this aha moment yesterday, and we're actually talking out in the nail salon because I couldn't wait to share it with you. So I've been reading this book by Gia Tolentino called Trick Mirror. And the very first chapter is called The Eye and Internet. And the point of the chapter isn't what I'm about to describe, but it's one of my takeaways, which is around this idea, this observation that Gia had that I agree with, which is that the internet in and of itself is frictionless and decontextualized. And large language models, the connection I made, because this book was written in 2017, made me think about AI and like large language models being trained on the internet. And we know that these frontier models, when you go directly to Claude or directly to ChatGPT, these are general purpose tools, and they only work well when you give it enough context. When you think about research, there's a lot of context that's needed for the large language model to perform optimally. It needs to understand your field of study, the genre, your research questions, your research topic, depending on what you're working on, whether it be the lit review or a data collection plan. And some of the early feedback that we got from our users was like, they don't want to answer those questions because we force our users to give some information to our platform before they can go right to the large language model. And that's because we know that it needs that context in order to give them relevant guidance or feedback. And from the very beginning, what we were hearing from our users was like, I just want to get to the screen where I can chat. I don't want to answer all of these questions. And we started going in the direction of trying to really pare down those user input questions. Like you and I were having a lot of conversations about what is the bare minimum that the AI needs to know in order to give relevant feedback. And we landed on just a few things like field of study, research question, variables if it's a quant study. But then what we know to be true is that it just doesn't give us good guidance. As consultants and as educators, if I'm meeting with a student, there's a lot of questions I have for them before I can give them useful feedback. Like I would never have a student just come to me and say, my topic is doctoral writing. And then I would just give them all this guidance that's going to be relevant for them. I would ask them a whole series of questions to really try to understand what they're getting at and what they want to know. And so it's the same if you want to get that level of quality with a large language model. And so you and I have been struggling with this a lot, is what is that right amount of friction? And then it just hit me like a ton of bricks after I was reading that chapter by Gia, is that with research in particular, we think about the importance of research. It drives decision-making in all sorts of industries. It's how we make really important decisions about healthcare and policy and education. And so we need that friction to be there. We need the friction in the learning. We need the friction in order to get the context we need. Otherwise, you're just going to be disappointed in the interaction that you have. And I just called you yesterday and I said, we're not budging on this. We're keeping the friction. I strongly believe that we are working with researchers, and for the integrity of research, we have to have friction. We have to have context. And our job isn't to remove the friction just to get more users to like our product. Our job is to educate our users on the importance of that friction and context instead. And I'm sure from my investors' perspective or our investors' perspective, they're like, no, just do it and need as many users as possible. But from our perspective, we want to feel like we are building a product that is actually really beneficial. And fortunately or unfortunately for the user, that means there's going to be some steps in the process that you might not go through if you go directly to a tool, such as I won't name our competitors directly, but there are competitors that we have that will just finish your sentence or your paragraph for you with little to no context. And that is not what we do at Moxie.
Right.
And I think we need to work on our messaging and helping that come through to the users when they land on our website so that they're not disappointed that they have to answer questions or that we're not finishing their sentences for them. But thank you, Gia, for, I doubt she listens to this podcast, but for helping me come full circle on this decision of friction.
Yeah, because I think from the perspective of a tech company and a tech industry, there's tech friction, and then there's learning friction or content related friction. And to me, it's similar because the tech is a tool. It's like language is a tool, and that we have this principle in language teaching that if the topic you're teaching is very complex and sophisticated, then the language they're learning needs to be simpler. So there's an inverse relationship between the complexity of topic and language. If you're teaching like in an English medium course, for example, and it's very complex physics, let's say, then you're going to have to lower the level of the language and for them to understand the topic. And then as they get better at the topic, they can use language in more complex ways, and vice versa. If you're teaching a very complicated language topic, subjunctive mood in English, for example, don't teach that with a physics example. If you're teaching a very complex linguistic topic, lower. And so to me, it's the same. It's like the tech, what we're struggling with is that there's friction in tech and there's friction in topic or learning. And we have researchers who come to us with these sophisticated, complex topics. They're using sophisticated, complex language, and we're introducing them to a sophisticated, it's technology. It's all up here. So how do we balance that out? It's hard.
It's really hard. And the temptation, which I totally understand as founders of the tech company, we understand the temptation to just do what the users want. But I also feel that research is really high stakes. It would be different if we were creating a marketing product that helps you write blog posts. Like that's very different. Research is so high stakes. Just another example of this is the simplification bias that we've been seeing. For those of you who might not follow us on LinkedIn, Kimberly recently posted about this. We get these notifications from ResearchGate, which shows snippets of how our research has been cited by other scholars. And something that has been frustrating to us is we see these snippets and we're not being cited correctly. Now, the level of correctness depends on the claim. Some are claiming that the study we did included human subjects and an intervention when it didn't. Sometimes the claims are just, they should be hedging instead of boosting. So it's just little language differences that actually make a big difference in the claim. This has always been a problem in research, but because of AI and the summarizing that's happening with these research assistants, there's the simplification bias that's happening, and we're worried that's happening. It's just going to only exacerbate that issue. And so we view our decision to force those contextualized questions and the friction before you get to the LLM as just one of the things that we can try to do to prevent some of that simplification. bias. And that's just one minor issue in terms of AI and research. But I think it's a good example that if you've ever conducted research or read a study or cited another scholar that you can probably identify with if you're using any of these AI tools that are on the market.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not willing to budge on. We are not willing to budge on this part because so here's a really good motivation for me. I was at a conference yesterday online through Iowa State University. It's called the Technology and Second Language Learning Conference. And usually it's all about kind of computer assisted language instruction, and it's always about tech, obviously, but this particular year it's focused on generative AI. And there was a keynote last night, and the speaker quoted a 2007 article that says, "We use written communication to replace and destabilize older ideas." That's what research does. It builds on top of itself, and it creates the conditions for change. And so when I think about research, scientific research, it's putting something out in the world that is going to be there for a long time. It stays in the condition that you put it out there. Once it's published, it is used for other people to build on. And so when we start going down the slippery slope of simplification bias, for example, or any other kind of, I don't know, suboptimal system of communication, it's really not just a problem in that moment. It's a problem for it creates conditions that are going to go on for a while, and it can be very destabilizing in a good way or a bad way.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect. I mean, it's really interesting, and I didn't realize how big of a problem it was until we started digging into the literature. I knew that it was an issue, but then it had me thinking about all of our studies. Are we because citing a source is complex. Are you interpreting what those authors or that author wrote correctly, whether it be the findings, whatever claim you're making, which could be about the findings of the study or a recommendation, or you're summarizing the methods, or there's a lot of different ways that we cite research. It requires you to comprehend and interpret it correctly, which requires you to read it. And before AI, we've always known, I work with doc students. I know how tempting it is when you're against a deadline to just read the abstract and not the actual study. And that was something that was interesting to us when we were really trying to categorize these different types of incorrect claims that were being made about our research. Was a lot of the information that they were pulling from was from the abstract. And that doesn't surprise me at all. And I could see where with these AI research assistants, especially these studies that are behind a paywall, are also pulling their summaries from information in the abstract, which does not paint the full picture. And this is not a problem that we're going to solve today in this discussion, but I think people need to be aware of it. And now I'm more aware of it when I think about the next literature review I conduct, in terms of really making sure that I'm going to the primary source. Pretty good about, I don't make decisions based off of an abstract, but really just thinking through how are we going to navigate this, and reducing the temptation to rely on a secondary source and how they've cited a study, because that can be tempting too. And I think it's just a reminder of the importance of spending the time before AI, but now especially with these AI tools.
Yeah. Yeah, because it was already hard. This is just introducing a new layer. Also, and I think the economic principle of opportunity cost. So let me just first of all say, I was an economics major for one semester, and I was really good at macroeconomics. I thought that was just the bee's knees. And then I enrolled in microeconomics. But despite my dislike of microeconomics, switch to English, what I learned is this idea of opportunity cost. The AI is bringing to us something, but there's a cost for that. And that cost means we are going to spend maybe more time chasing down that source. I remember 20 years ago, when I was finishing my master's, we were teaching composition students in first year writing how to judge a website. and what to look for in a website. And we would say, you got to go down to the bottom to the about link, and you got to find out who created this website. And you have to ask, what are their credentials and what are their motivations? Who's funding them? And they were like, that's a lot of work. Yeah, it's a lot of work. But think about how much work it would have been if you didn't have the internet. It would have you would have had to go to a library, horror, and look at a book. It's an opportunity, but there's always a cost.
It's interesting that you say that, because with a book, at least for me, the very first thing I do is typically when you buy a book, who the author is. Like the very first thing I did when I ordered this book by Gia Tolentino, it was recommended to me. So I didn't go look her up and do my research on her before I ordered it because it was a recommendation. But the first thing I did was I read her biography. I looked her up online. I wanted to understand who she is and her perspective before reading her work. And that's like a normal thing that we do when we buy a book. Typically, we already know who the author is. So we already have an idea of that credibility that they bring to whatever it is that they've written. And yeah, that goes back to the decontextualization and frictionless component of the internet. It makes it so easy to consume information. And we already, as a society, well before AI, have gotten in the habit of just believing everything because it's written on the internet. But it does stem from before the internet. Typically, when you take the time to buy something and read it, you're inherently doing that sort of credibility check, which now we've gotten in the habit of not doing by just consuming everything online. Researchers, we should know better, but we're human, so we're not without fault. And I'm sure that if you went in and like really looked closely at all of our research, everything I've ever written, I am positive that I have incorrectly made a claim. So I'm definitely not sitting here from my high horse saying that we haven't done it.
No.
Suddenly I'm much more aware of it because of AI. ResearchGate is able to quickly give us these snippets. Before, it would just give you a list of citations and you'd have to go in and find where you've been cited. And now I just see it on my screen and I'm like, oh, that is not correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me more about what you learned at the conference. You were giving me some good nuggets yesterday.
Oh, yeah. One of the really interesting presentations I went to was about international graduate students in U.S. institutions reporting on how they use ChatGPT to navigate their academic endeavors in general. And it was a qualitative study where I don't know if she did interviews or surveys, but she asked them, what do you use it for? And they said things like idea generation, and I use it to verify if I'm on the right track, and then it increases my confidence, or I'll use it to brainstorm and get started. But they expressed a lot of inner conflict because while it boosts their self-confidence, they felt like in that same moment, it ruins their confidence too, because they felt like they didn't deserve it if they got the answer or if they were helped by ChatGPT. It made them feel a fake student, I think was the quote, a fake PhD student. It was the actual quote, who can never be as good as ChatGPT or something like that, which isn't true at all. And we talk a lot about what it means to be a good writer, what it means to be a good communicator. There's a lot of surface level accuracy and precision. I've called it synthetic precision, synthetic accuracy. It's like on the surface, it looks good, but when you dig a little deeper, the human depth is missing. The complexity, the variety in the ideas and the language is missing. And I think people need to be reassured that right now they're fine as long as you're using it ethically and I love this idea of using it to boost self-confidence. I do that. There are times when just at the conference yesterday, someone said something and I was like, I don't think that's what that word means. Immediately I thought, oh, it must be me. I must have been telling people in webinars all over the place that this is wrong. Must have been finding this word wrong. And that wasn't true. I looked it up and I was right. And what this person said was not the definition. And it was something small. It doesn't matter. The technology allowed me to verify and confirm my own intuition really was right. And so that's what the students were saying. They feel guilty about using it, but at the same time, they're proud when they get an A, or they feel confident, they feel empowered. But there's a lot of there's a lot that comes with opportunity cost. It's an opportunity, but it's definitely having a different kind of a cost.
I think good writing is intimidating.
Yes.
And we're not, I don't think, born good writers. Obviously, some people are better writers than others. Good writing is intimidating. I used to have, my perfectionism has always been terrible. I used to agonize over just writing a blog post for my business, like really wanting to make sure that I got all the grammar correct. And I would really second guess myself and spend so much time. And then I might sit on it for weeks because I'm worried that it's going to be criticized. And I think about, I don't have that anymore. I feel so much more confident in my writing. But good writing is intimidating. Like, even I think about this book I'm reading now, like, she's an incredible writer. I love her writing style. And I enjoy writing. And I started thinking about, oh, it would be so amazing if I could write like this. And so I can see where, if you, even if you are a good writer, if you don't identify as a strong writer, because these large language models write so well, that accuracy is there. It's very polished. It can, I think it can feel intimidating. And then you start to want to compare yourself to the machine. So I can see, yeah, I can see both sides of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably the most disturbing thing that I heard from that particular study was this idea of shame and secret, or even the researcher called it fugitive use, where the students were hiding it. They didn't want anybody to know the extent to which they were relying on it because they're concerned about being judged, or worse, being accused of academic dishonesty. And so they're like, yeah, they're secretly doing it, but then they're judging themselves for it. And it's just transparency to me is like, whoa, secrets make you sick. You can't live with a secret like that. And it's in the dark, it's just going to grow and bring it to light, and things get better. And you feel compassion for other people when they say, oh yeah, me too. I wrote my email with ChatGPT or with Claude. I say this all the time to people. I use Claude to emphasize politeness in my emails, to make sure that what I'm saying is clear to somebody who's not in my brain, because of course it's clear in my brain, but you don't live in my brain. And so you need the writing to stand on its own, so you don't have to come back and ask me. That was one of the things I used to teach in business communication. Is I would say, when you send an email, you do not want, especially if it's to a group of people, what you don't want to happen is for 3 people to misunderstand it and 2 people to be offended by it. And then you have to deal with that fallout. You want that email to go out and be clear, understandable, and kind enough to be accepted by people, so that you don't then join the communication volley back and forth. You really want to prioritize that audience understanding. It's the same with research. You don't want that publisher or that editor, that peer reviewer to be confused. You want it to just be crystal clear.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to share about the conference that I heard, and this was a really pretty cool story. It was a veteran researcher who was talking about, so there's an aspect of linguistics that's called pragmatics, and it's a little bit different from what we mean by the word pragmatic in general. It means pragmatics is the study of, like, how do we change the way we speak or write when the audience changes, like the power dynamics between professor and student, for example, or between peers, how that has an effect on our language. And so the story he told to start his presentation was that he had been in Vietnam traveling, and he overheard an American tourist at a hotel go to the grill at the hotel and request in English fried eggs over easy, which of course means with runny yolks. And the cook, who was Vietnamese, had trouble understanding what he wanted. And so the tourist repeated his request, but the cook still didn't understand. And so the tourist says, okay, I'll come back later. Thank you. And the cook didn't respond. And the tourist started to walk away, but then he turned back around and he said, I said, thank you. And so the researcher then said, why did the tourist make this statement? Of course, the room's filled with linguists. So we all said, he expects you're welcome. He expects a response, right? To thank you. Maybe not you're welcome, but okay. some kind of response, and he didn't get it. And so the researcher wanted to ask ChatGPT to see if ChatGPT could understand what that tourist meant. And so he asked ChatGPT, what did the tourist mean by that? And ChatGPT missed the point entirely. Now, I have to say, he was using GPT 3.5. Lots of these people at this conference were still talking about 3.5, comparing 3.5 and 4. And to me, I'm like, why are we still even, I don't know why anybody's using or studying 3.5.
Yeah.
Unless, I can see not for linguistic reasons, because to me, it just seems like 4 is so much better. But anyway, he asked ChatGPT. ChatGPT missed the point entirely. It did not understand that this person expected a response. It focused on what the man meant by thank you, that he was expressing gratitude, that he was wanting to acknowledge that the cook didn't understand, but that otherwise it was, it was so interesting. And so his point was like critical AI literacy, especially if you're studying any sort of pragmatic focus of the language, you really need to understand that ChatGPT is not functioning like a human following pragmatic rules of interaction. It's just predicting the next word or words, phrases, etc.
It makes you think about how people, because I know that there's a lot of companies now that are using AI for translation. It makes me think about, because now I know that there's apps where you could pull up and you could just hold it up and it'll translate for you to the other person. I have not used these apps. Now I'm starting to think about what's going to get lost in translation through these AI translators. Like, how are they going to account for those sort of pragmatics and interactions between different cultures? And
yeah, there's these really cool things. I can't believe I've never told you about this, because this is absolutely the kind of linguistic information that I think you would like. There was a researcher called Grice. His last name was Grice, and he created these, and this is like 1989, right? Paul Grice. And he said there are 4 maxims that people follow when they're in conversation. The first one is quality, which means we are truthful, or that we understand when somebody is not being truthful, like they're being sarcastic, or we pick up when they're maybe lying for some reason. So quality. Relevance, which is contextual pertinence. So when someone says something out of the blue and you're like, oh, what? That was awkward. It needs to be relevant. And manner. Manner is just clearness and not and being concise and conveying your message appropriately so that someone understands. But the last one is quantity. So the idea is like you say what's needed and no more. You're probably thinking this about me right now. Like Kim's saying a lot about linguistics. Are our listeners going to be interested in this? We all have that friend or that family member that's very verbose, like you can't get off the phone with them. That they're violating the Gricean maxim of quantity. They're saying too much. And it's so interesting how you can apply this once you know to every conversation. And comedians violate this to make us laugh, for example. But generally, we expect people to follow these. And when they break those norms, you can almost always categorize it in some way into one of those maxims. It's really interesting that ChatGPT can tell you about Grice's maxims. If you ask it, what are the 4? It can tell you. Very good. It can give you examples, but it doesn't follow them because it's not a sentient being.
No, it's not pulling from experience, and it can't read the moment. It's similar, but not the same. It makes me think about Fei Li's work on spatial intelligence and embodiment, and how it's pretty incredible what they've been able to accomplish with computer vision. Whereas before the recent advancements in generative AI, if you showed a computer an image of 2 people leaning together who are maybe, and it's an intimate conversation, how the computer would just recognize that as 2 people at a cafe having conversation. But a human would look at that and say, they're having an intimate conversation, or they're having an argument. How we derive meaning from how the body language is. And so I think about computer vision, because obviously there's different modes of generative AI. We have text generation, we have computer vision, we have multimodal now, videos, audio. But yeah, this ability for a human to walk into the room, immediately read the room, understand what's happening, understand the context without any information is through learned and lived experience. And we're constantly filtering that through our prior experiences. And AI is not a human. As good as it is, as good as that text output is, it's still not a human. And so the expectation that it could be able to do that perfectly, maybe one day.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of when I was teaching in the community college years ago. I always, at the final exam in my writing class, this was a very beginner kind of academic writing class where the final goal was to compose a paragraph, which of course was in your second language, 500 words. That's a pretty big deal. I don't know that many Americans graduate high school I couldn't have done it in Spanish, which was my second language. But anyway, the question is, what's your favorite holiday? That was one of the questions they could choose from to write about. I was walking around the room looking during the final, seeing if anybody needed help. And I noticed people were writing about Black Friday.
Interesting.
And do you think of Black Friday as a holiday?
No, I think of it. Yeah, no, not
Yeah.
no.
No, but I mean, think about it from their perspective. You get
You're
the holiday
in America. Yeah. And it's like everyone celebrates it by going shopping.
Yes.
Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the day after Thanksgiving. And so they were like, but why is it not a holiday? And I was like, it's a celebration of capitalism and consumer. You can't. Yeah. And I made them start over. They're not happy. I was like, you can write about Thanksgiving, but
it's not a holiday.
It's not a holiday. And it's so interesting because from their perspective, you get the day off work. There are certain things that it fits the definition, but that's what happens in a language model because the context is reduced. It seems to be fitting some of the criteria, but not all of them.
That is so interesting. It just reminds me of, I've been on this role lately where I'm become obsessed with understanding late stage capitalism. And I feel like that is the perfect example of where we are in America. Of you have the day off to go shopping for things that are on sale. Oh, I can't.
But the people who work at the stores don't have the day off.
It's crazy.
In fact, they have to work more because the hours are extended.
Yeah, well, now it's like
more shoppers.
Starts the day before, and now it's like a week-long event online. It's
yeah. And if you think about like cultural dominance in large language models, this idea of what are the holidays? What are the most common holidays?
Imagine how
Thanksgiving would be on there, but not all countries celebrate.
No.
And then I think about that study that looked at the Arabic speakers who were using ChatGPT, and what was the question? It was something like, what's an appropriate activity that I can do with my friends after prayer or something? And ChatGPT suggested to go have a beer.
Yeah. No cocktails. Yeah.
No. They're wrong culture.
Yeah.
It's not just the words that need to align. It's not just the grammar, the syntax. It's the depth and the meaning behind those words in a specific context. And I think that's what people miss when they use AI for a learning product to a deliverable, and it looks good on the surface because the grammar, the syntax, the spelling, the punctuation may all be just right. But that's just accuracy. That's not flow. That's not depth. That's not variety. That's just only that small part of the written product.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we?
Oh, yeah. We should wrap up. We have a tech meeting soon.
Yes, we do.
Pit and Peach.
Pit and Peach. You go first. I've been talking a lot.
Oh, gosh. All right. I'm going to start with my peach. I feel like I always start with my pit. I'm reading a book right now that's reminding me that our emotions start with our thoughts. So it's thoughts, emotions, behavior. Because I've been very as burnout and trying to manage my moods when I wake up in the morning. And I'm listening to this book and he's just telling me things that I already know, but it's good reminders. And so it's like starting with my peach instead of the pit. He also reminded me in this book, this is a little off topic, about these scholars on emotions. Brene Brown is one of them, how one of the first studies that came out categorized human emotions into 4 categories, where like 3 were negative, 1 was positive, and then 10, like 8 were negative, 2 were positive. And then Brene Brown's research had like 87 emotions, but still more than a majority are negative emotions, and how it's just human nature to focus on the negative. So I'm really trying to shift my thinking. So that's why I'm starting with my peach. So I'd say that my peach this week, honestly, reading Gia Tolentino's book, Trick Mirror, while I was getting a pedicure in the middle of the day yesterday. Typically, those are things I would not do in the middle of the day, but this is how I'm trying to treat my burnout, is allowing myself to give myself a break when I need it, not waiting until the end of the day or the weekend. Sitting in the nail salon yesterday and having a pedicure and reading that book just felt so luxurious, and it was really nice. I really enjoyed it. I think I texted 7 people, you need to order this book. It's really good.
Me, I was one of them.
My pit of the week is related to travel. I don't know why I do this to myself. It goes back to my inherent desire to try to optimize my time. I traveled last weekend to the West Coast, and I remember sitting there making the decision about my flight home. Was I going to do it on a Monday during the day, which would have allowed me to not take a red eye and try to force myself to do work on the plane and clear any meetings I had on Monday because it was a last minute trip? Or was I going to do it Sunday night and just take advantage of the time I would be sleeping so I could wake up and hit the ground running on Monday? We know how that worked out. I did not get any sleep. We had horrible turbulence on the plane. I'm at the airport waiting to board at 10:30 p.m., which my normal bedtime is 8:30 or 9. I'm really cranky. I get off the plane Monday morning and I'm so out of it. I was like a zombie. I still had to cancel my morning meetings, go take a nap, and then it took 2 days to catch up on sleep. That was my pit. And I was also am I ever going to learn this lesson? How many times have I done that? I don't know if I'm ever going to learn my lesson. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I know. We just keep repeating the same patterns until we learn.
We don't.
When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So my peach, I'll take the hint and focus on the positive first, is that we have a hiking trip planned tomorrow to Northeast Iowa. The leaves in Iowa are beautiful this time of year. Iowa is underrated. Iowa and Minnesota have gorgeous falls. They happen pretty early. This is actually, the leaves have peaked now, and we have to go this weekend or they're all going to fall. But I have been just walking. I sent you a picture out my window the other day. So it's the sky is so blue, and the contrast between those orangey red maple leaves and that blue sky, it takes my breath away. Every fall, I'm like, oh, that's why I like living in the Midwest where we have the 4 seasons, because I grew up in the South and you don't really have as many hardwoods. I grew up around a lot of pine.
Yeah.
They stay green. And so I love that you see the seasons changing and you feel that. Of course, you got to endure the winter, but yeah, that's really cool. So I'm excited about the hiking trip to peep the leaves in Northeast Iowa. My not bad. I don't even where to start. I've had a kind of a hard week.
You've had a hard week.
I've had a hard week. Should we just say teenagers?
We can just say
teenagers.
Teenagers.
My kids are teenagers.
I think it sucks to be one and it sucks to have one.
Yes.
I would never want to go back to teenagers. Never.
Or even my 20s.
Yeah, I'd like to start. I would maybe go back to 27 and then that's it. That's the youngest I would go.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So.
Yeah, you can leave it at that. Teenagers. Yeah.
Teenagers.
Yeah, use your imagination. All right. Everyone, we are looking forward to seeing you again next week. I think we have a guest next week, or maybe it's the following week, but we're coming up.
The next guest we have scheduled is early November. Right. So it's someone who has done a lot of work in AI and course creation and training undergraduate students in AI and ethical approaches to AI. So really cutting edge stuff. It's coming up. And then we have hopefully a couple of episodes on entrepreneurship, because I believe World Women Entrepreneurship Day is coming up in November. And
I have someone in mind for that who I reach out to, I promise.
Yeah, that was my hint.
Yes.
Yeah, some really cool people coming up that are on the schedule, but you'll have to wait and see.
Have a good weekend, everyone, and we'll see you next week.